Paul here from My Perfect Failure, helping you turn your failures into successes and your setbacks into opportunities. From the chaotic streets of Miami in the 1980s, where cartels and crime ruled, to the serene world of mindfulness and meditation, Bob Martin's story is like no other. Bob went from being a hippie to a high-powered lawyer, defending mobsters during one of the most dangerous times in Miami's history. But today, Bob's dedicated to helping people find peace through meditation and mindfulness. In this episode, Bob takes us inside Miami's Cocaine Cowboy era, explains why luck is all about preparation, and shares how meditation principles and metacognition changed his life and can change yours too. This episode is a reminder that even the most dramatic life turns can lead us to exactly where we want to be. So get ready for an unforgettable conversation and tune in wherever you get your podcast.
Who knows what Jay-Z, J.K. Rowling, Bill Gates and Oprah Winfrey all have in common? Okay, I will tell you then. They have all overcome failure in one shape or form to go on to gain success in their respective careers. Welcome to My Perfect Failure. Join us as we delve into the world of our perfect failures. We will interview, explore, and discuss how our perfect failures can lead us to success. Join us and tune in.
Welcome everybody to another episode of My Perfect Failure. Today, I'm super excited because I have an amazing guest for you. So my guest today, story reads like a movie script. Once a high-powered lawyer in Miami's infamous Cocaine Cowboy era, subsequently, he made a remarkable pivot to become a certified meditation teacher and professor of wellness at Elon University. With a background in law, psychology, and brain science, he now helps people break free from limiting beliefs and design the life they truly desire. In this episode, he shares his fascinating journey blending Taoist wisdom, humor, and real-world insights on resilience and transformation. So a very warm welcome to My Perfect Failure, Bob Martin. How are you, Bob?
I am doing terrific today. Thank you for having me on as a guest.
No, I'm excited. I'm excited. I was telling people before when we first engaged a little bit about you. So there's people already excited to hear about Bob Martin, who I wasn't aware of until the top of the year. So there's people fascinated with your journey from this lawyer background to mindfulness meditation. I guess to us, when we were having conversations, they just seemed very different careers. So, but both quite exciting in their own right. So I guess where I'd like to start is kind of at the beginning, really, of your journey. We'll get into the lawyer bit in a bit. I would like to cover that a little bit because I'm curious myself. But as a child, did you envisage becoming a lawyer? How did becoming a lawyer become part of you, part of your journey?
No, I had no idea that I was going to become a lawyer. None.
Really?
That was not my ambition.
Really? So how did that happen?
Well, I grew up in the carnival amusement park environment, and you know, my ambition. I mean, my ambition was in 1968, 1969. My ambition was to sell enough hot dogs on the boardwalk in Queens, New York, to not have to work in the winter.
Really?
That was my big ambition.
Big shift.
And I was a football player, but I had a career-ending injury in 1969. So what does a jock do when he no longer is a sports player? In 1969, he becomes a hippie. So I was at the greatest extent, I was walking around in a tuxedo and a tie-dyed t-shirt and a top hat and pink sunglasses. So just to give you an image of
I love that image. I've got a visual now in my
Yeah,
head.
yeah. So those were the days in the States. Those were the days of Watergate and the Vietnamese War
Mm,
and Cambodia and a lot of protests going on, Kent State, all those things. And I lived in a hippy dippy little communal apartment, and you never knew who was going to be there that evening and who was going to be with who that evening.
mm.
It was one of the free love places, you
Sounds
know.
an interesting time.
It was an interesting time. And there was this young man, John Berman, who, yeah, he was kind of our librarian. He read the Times and the Post every day, and we would ask him questions like, "Hey, when did Nixon go into Cambodia?" And I was always arguing about everything. And John said that you should be a lawyer. You should be a lawyer. And I go, "Oh, stop! I never mind. It's not what I want to do." Well, one day John disappeared, a couple of weeks, and then he came back and he handed me an envelope. And the envelope had in it a postal money order made out to the Educational Testing Service so that it could not be cashed for
So you
$350.
couldn't cash it.
It couldn't cash it. And it had to be given to the Educational Testing Service, who were the people who gave the law school aptitude test. And he said, "You should be a lawyer, go take the test." I said, "Where'd you get the money?" He says, "I got a job." I said, "You're working?" He goes, "No, I quit." I said, "Why you quit?" I quit. I just wanted to make the money to get you the money to take the test. And so I took the test, and one law school took a chance on me. And John was a heroin addict. We pulled him out of shooting galleries in Harlem twice, sat on him while he was DTing. But when I got accepted to law school, John went straight. And not only that, he enrolled in paralegal school, and he was going to be my investigator, and we were going to do this thing together.
What an amazing
and
story.
and he stayed by my side all through law school and all through the study for the bar exam, and up until the time that I was sworn in and hired by Janet Reno to be a state prosecutor. And 3 days after I was sworn in, um, John met some chick. They decided to shoot up, and he had forgotten that over 3 years of cleanliness, his tolerance for the drug went down, and he overdosed and died. That's how I became a lawyer.
What a fascinating story. He was almost like an angel to you.
Almost, I see it that way, and I have seen my career as a never-ending debt,
Mm,
and something to honor. I mean, John gave me his life to make me a lawyer,
mm,
and that leaves you with a certain feeling of dignity.
yeah. Do you think we're going to get into the mindfulness and the the various spiritual traditions that you use today and you support people all over the world with. But do you think that in some funny way, that what you're doing now is almost part of that interaction you had with John?
Sure, sure, obviously. It's everything. I mean, John is a piece of the puzzle, and there are so many other pieces of the puzzle. I mean, I read To Kill a Mockingbird. I don't know if on your side of the pond it's well known,
Yeah, well known here.
Atticus Finch, the lawyer who had such a restrained and subtle heroism about him impressed me when I was 14. Then I became a lawyer. Is that a piece of the puzzle?
Yeah.
So there's so much. I lately I have been thinking about the difference between coincidence, in other words, things that happen at the same time, together, incident, just all it means is it happened at the same time.
Mm,
And the idea of synchronicity, is there some kind of a glue or a force that brings those things together to be coincidental? And I've just been thinking about that a
mm.
lot lately.
It's fascinating, that relationship, that connection, and also the fact that you seized the opportunity. So he gave you the opportunity, because it's that saying that you can I might not say this correctly, but you can take a horse to water, but you can't force a horse to drink the water. So remarkably, he wasn't working. He was an addict. He got a job unbeknown to you, specifically with you in mind, got the money, knew exactly what the amount was for the course. I guess he was very intentional, but that money could not be cash. In the 60s, you said that you were a hippie, so that money could have maybe you wouldn't have had to make hot dogs for a few weeks and you could have had a good time. But the thing is, you still had to go and take the exam, so you were very intentional. Because I always think to myself sometimes, are there moments, do we miss moments in life where an opportunity is presented to us, but maybe we're not just cognizant of actually this is a moment. This is a
Yeah,
moment.
Vince Lombardi, the famous coach of the Green Bay Packers, um, said there's no such thing as luck. There is only the intersection of opportunity and preparedness. You could be highly prepared and not have the opportunity, or the opportunity can come along and you're not ready to take advantage of it. But when you're prepared and the opportunity presents itself, we call it luck,
Yeah.
but not luck.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. That's a good analogy to use. That's quite inspiring as well. So everybody prepare. So when you get the ball, I guess in an American football analogy, you're good to go. So the lawyer career happened. At Christmas, I randomly had a bit of downtime as we do at Christmas, and I watched a few things on Netflix. And one of the things I came across was, sorry, Cocaine Cowboy, and I had no idea that I didn't even know you at this point. And a few months later, you and I are having a conversation, and it was one of those periods. It was that period between Christmas and New Year's, and I didn't have any family commitments. There were no events going on outside my family with friends. So I was able pretty much to watch this fascinating documentary. I think there were probably 5 or 6 episodes. And then obviously you and I are talking now. So you were slap bang in the middle of this really quite insane
Yep.
period. Could you maybe describe what that was like and what was going on for people that aren't familiar, what that era was like in Miami at that time?
Well, I think that there are three forces that operated to make Miami went so crazy that Time magazine ran a cover with a picture of Miami and a headline that said Paradise Lost.
Really?
There were three forces, I would say, that came to a head at the same time. Number one was the introduction of crack into instead of just cocaine powder. All of a sudden, crack took hold, and the crack business. Crack is so highly addictive that one use can bring a person into intense cravings for the rest of their life. One use.
Really?
It's intensely addictive. And cocaine is not so addictive. People, many people use cocaine and never develop an addiction to it, the powder. So crack was developed, and it is also capable of being smuggled because it doesn't smell like cocaine powder. And it can be formed into things like lamp bases. So anyway, that was one thing. The other thing was the Mariel boat lift. When Carter was president, he made a declaration that families in Miami could send boats over to Cuba to pick up their relatives and they would be admitted and processed. And so a flotilla of fishing boats were hired to go to Cuba. But when he got there, Castro also, along with the relatives, also loaded on all his criminals and mental institution inmates. And so Miami was flooded with criminals and with crazy people. So that was the second thing, is the crack in that. And also, there was just the rising of the Colombian cartels. And so all of those things kind of came to a head together, and Miami was just the focal point. Also, Miami was becoming an international banking center, And so all of the money laundering that was going on was there. So it was just the perfect storm for everything to happen. And just to give you an idea how crazy it was, when I was a prosecutor, at the more experienced prosecutors, the ones higher up in the office, we had to serve on homicide duty, and there had to be four prosecutors on homicide duty every day, because they could easily be called out to four different homicide sites in the city in that one day.
That's
So you're
crazy.
talking about, 369, about over 1,200, killings in a year. And it was crazy. Not only that, but Castro had agents in Miami, and he was handing out weapons to the crazies who came off the boats. And so oh, it was just nuts.
When you say perfect storm, it sounds incredibly chaotic, and it must have been being a prosecutor at that time and trying to make head or tail of it and to function. I can't think what that must have been like.
And on top of that, the incredible amount of money and all of the chrome and glass, ritzy discotheques that popped up. And
Yeah,
if you've ever seen the movie Scarface or the TV show Miami Vice,
yeah,
of course, those are fictional stories, but the vibe that they portray, that is very accurate. That was the vibe of Miami in those days.
really. So
Yeah,
I'm old
really.
enough to remember Miami Vice. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'm old enough to remember Miami Vice. So I'm age a little bit. So I totally get that vibe and that context. And the two central characters in Cocaine Cowboy, were you familiar with those guys at the time? Were they
Which ones were they?
They were, I think it was Sal Magaluta and Willie Falcon.
I don't know about Falcon, but Matalucha, yeah, he was part of the Italian group, and uh, he, I was at a couple of functions where he was there. My mob connection was a fellow that I called Johnny. He's Giovanni was his name, and he went as Johnny, and he was part of one of the New York families, and had was the made man who was in charge of the Italian franchise of Miami, and I got to know him pretty well. Very nice fella. I mean, just like very, very, very nice, very honorable in terms of our agreements and our arrangements. I told him I wouldn't do anything unethical and I wouldn't do anything illegal, and he grumbled a little bit at that at first. But I said, but Johnny, look, you really need to have a lawyer that's trusted by the courts, that has
Mm,
good respect. That's in your best interest. If I am caught in a lie or a misrepresentation to the court one time, my reputation shot. So he says, yeah, I can see that. I can see that. You know, so we had a good relationship. As long as, I found that with that element, as long as, they don't have a police force to enforce their agreements. They can't go to court on a broken agreement. And
yeah,
so you have to be good for your word. And you have to say what you can do and don't overstate things and don't oversell things, and be good for your word and do what you say you're going to do, or say that you can't do it. That's okay. They understand that stuff happens, which, that's what Johnny said to me. He says, everybody talks about integrity and they think that integrity is about telling the truth. Well, there ain't no truth. So it can't be about telling the truth. What integrity is you do what you said you were going to do. And if you can't do it, you say you can't do it. That's integrity. I think he's right.
yeah, yeah. I get that from a personal and a standpoint. That
Mhm.
works. I guess in law, I don't know. Not don't have that knowledge base. I guess people that are on that, I guess, are mobsters, having legal representation, people that can say to them, look, this is the wrong side of the line. You need to act and in accordance with behavior or things that you can do that fall within this framework. So you're not doing anything. So there's no criminality. So I guess that is important for them as well.
Yes. Well, a lot of people ask me, because, once I left the prosecutor's office, I became a defense attorney, and I defended mobsters, but I also defended child abusers and rapists and, all those folks. And some of them I had very little stomach for, the person themselves,
Yeah.
the dirtbag itself. But I represented them, and I represented them vigorously. And people ask, how can you do that? Especially when it comes to, child abuse. I mean, I have become aware of, and I have seen things that you can't unsee and you wish you could. And the reason that you can is because the prosecutor's job, the police job, is to enforce the law. And it's important to keep us safe. The defense attorney's job is to enforce the Constitution.
Okay, and that's how you have to look at it, the Constitution.
And that's the way we look at it. In other words, my job is to prosecute the prosecutors, and the police, when they take shortcuts, they break the rules. Because by doing that, I ensure that innocent people don't get convicted, because I keep them accountable. And if they know, in places where you have a very weak defense bar, like maybe in the eastern shoreline of North Carolina, you have hundreds of cases of forced confessions and people being freed by DNA evidence that were unlawfully convicted because of police misconduct, because the defense bar down there is, or was at one time, it's way different now, but at one time it was very chummy. It was small towns and everybody was very chummy and nobody wanted to step on anybody's toes.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people got convicted that shouldn't have been. So we think of ourselves as the guardians of liberty and the trustees of justice. And, we keep the state and the government's power honest.
I like that analogy, and I've never thought of it like that as well, where you use the Constitution as your reference point. So you're making sure that the prosecution are acting in accordance with the Constitution, and I guess regardless of who you're representing, you need to make sure that they aren't the prosecution are not taking any liberties that impact the Constitution.
It raises some messy questions, like what happens if your client tells you, here's the truth, this is what happened, A, B, C, and D, but I'm going to get up there and I'm going to testify to E, G, and F. I'm going to lie when I get on the stand. Now, I can't tell I got lawyer-client privilege. It's confidential. I can't reveal that. And I have to represent him. So can I assist him in proffering a lie to the court? No, I can't. How do I deal with that? So there are some messy issues. Yeah.
So we are going to get into the mindfulness and the meditation bit in a second, because I'm equally as curious about that. But as a lawyer, particularly if you're on the defense, I guess it can be either side, dependent on what type of case you're dealing with. You guys have any type? Because today we talk about well-being a lot, particularly since the pandemic and so forth. But I'm thinking about well-being of lawyers when you're dealing with these really challenged times. So you were in that Cocaine Cowboy era, dealing with mobsters, having to engage with them who were doing any number of different challenging, unseemly acts that were going on. And then obviously when you go to the defense side, you're having to deal with people that allegedly may have committed some quite, heinous crimes. At that time, obviously we're going back decades, was there any type of well-being that you guys were given just to deal with what you were dealing with?
Bar associations, the associations of lawyers have been dealing with alcohol abuse, with drug abuse, with depression, with these factors among lawyers for years and years. Lately, they have developed more of a proactive stance where they offer, right now, for example, all lawyers every year have to take we have to take 12 credits of continuing legal education every year. And every year, one of those has to be in well-being. How to practice and the changes in the law, of course. We have to take one in technology changes, one in well-being, and one in ethics, and then 9 in practice.
Okay.
So there's more concern now, but years ago, there was just a lot of screwed up lawyers.
I can imagine dealing with what.
And I was.
Really?
I was. My family life was going to pot. I was making money hand over foot, but I was spending it as fast as I was making it. I was throwing myself into my work and coming home at midnight and leaving at 6 in the morning and not spending any time with my kids. And no, it was a mess. It was all falling apart. And that's where the, change came from.
Okay, nice segue. So what
the segue.
What was the segue?
So I was seeing a therapist, and long story short, I found out, and I have to preface this by saying I did not grow up in a religious family because my folks were immigrants and all of their ancestors had been wiped out by one group or another, so they really didn't, weren't very religious. So I found out that my therapist was actually one of the top students and the English language editor for a 72nd generation. When I think about 1,400 years of passing wisdom down from father to son. 72nd generation Taoist master from the Shaolin Temple. That's the Koru Temple. And so I was at a crossroads, and he did this Taoist hocus pocus, seemed to me at the time. And I got pissed off because I thought my therapist had gone crazy, but he gave me the absolute right advice. And then I asked him what that was, and he said it was Taoism. And for those of you who don't know what Taoism, I pronounce it with a D, but it's spelled with a T. And Taoism is a sister to Buddhism. It basically deals with the same issues that Buddhism deals with, but from a slightly different angle. About learning how to skillfully go with the flow and skillfully. And so I met Master Ni, and I studied under him for 7 years, changed my life. I'll tell you just this little quick story about Master Ni. So we asked him once, why do they call you master? And he said, well, because I've mastered life. And he giggled and walked away. But then we grabbed him and we said, well, what does it mean to master life? And then he became serious and he said, when you can interfere with the flow of things the least, yet have the appropriate impact on them, you have begun to master life.
So what does that mean? So I'm trying to figure out does that mean that we become aware and we're able to appropriately engage with what's ever going on in that moment?
Well,
what's the engagement with?
That means that we allow things to mature on their own as much as possible. And when we need to interfere with the process, try to do it the least amount possible in order to have the effect that you want to have. And so many of us are task oriented and we just want to get the tasks done. But so often we go ahead and get the task done before it's ripe to be done. And so we have to work much harder and less efficiently.
And can that be in relationship to work and personal life?
Everything. It's for instance, you wouldn't give somebody something to read at dusk. Okay, it's not the proper time of day because there's not enough light. So you're interfering in a way that's ineffective and inefficiently. And so another example might be if you're out in the ocean and you want to get into shore, you could panic and drown. That's not what you want to do. You could say, damn the torpedoes full speed ahead and just swim towards. You might get to the shore, but you're going to be exhausted, not really able to do much else. Or you can notice the flow of the tide And when it's going toward shore, exert the energy that you need to exert. And when it's going against you, you don't want to be swept out to sea. So the amount of energy that you need to use at that point is just enough to hold still and regenerate and restore your energy. So when the tide turns around and goes in again, you have the energy to swim like heck.
Yeah.
In that case, you'll get to shore and you will be energized. You will have effectuated it by exercising the least amount of energy, and you will have achieved your goal.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
so that is the wisdom of understanding what it means to skillfully go with the flow.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm imagining that we have to give ourselves time to understand what flow looks like to us. So we just become aware. Because as you were talking, I'm thinking about 2025, where it's so chaotic in the world. And I guess that can be mirrored in our lives. And it's very, for some of us, it's counterintuitive. And it probably was for you at the time, being a sort of a high-powered lawyer, to take stock and to do things in a considered fashion that is going to be beneficial for you. But when you think about, I've got any number of different things to do, sometimes we think, well, no, 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 I need to do it now. Did you have to, I guess, go through a process where you were prepared to engage what was it, sorry, not doctor, was it Master Nee, the person you mentioned?
Master Nee?
Yeah. Did you have to go? Did you have to? I guess you were ready to engage what he was saying to you.
Oh yeah, yeah. I met Master Nee, and I'm sure, I'm sure, Paul, you've run into some people that the moment you meet them,
Mm,
this guy's got it.
yeah,
He's got it. I want to know what he knows. Just open my brain up and pour it in, please. And he
yeah,
was just that kind of person. So I guess I was ready. Yeah, I was ready. I mean, things were falling apart and I needed something. And this guy, he was just happy all the time. But yet he was serious. He didn't talk too much, but everything he said was a pearl, and I remember one time we were watching a movie and he just got up at a certain point and he goes, I like this ending. And he got up and left.
I
And
love
he
that.
was like three-quarters over. And he said, no, I like this ending. This is a good ending.
I
Uh,
love that. I'm
and
imagining, imagine going to the cinema and just think, oh, this is, leaving 45 minutes or maybe half an hour before the film ends. That's a great ending.
yeah, yeah,
Um,
it's great.
so I want to get into, when did you decide that you were going to leave the legal profession that you'd been in for years and years, decades and decades, and then you actually were going to start actually not just engaging with mindfulness and meditation, and I know that you're a happiness coach as well, when you were going to leave the legal profession and actually engage this, but also start teaching this to people, around the world.
So, it was a process. Things kind of again were kind of synchronous, just as my learning with Master Nee was really beginning to take hold and be transformative. I ran into a little trouble with my clients, my mob clients, because his son got arrested, and it was no longer I won't do this and I won't do that. You will do this and you will do
Oh,
that. I
really?
said, no, I won't. And so we kind of just figured it would be better if I left Miami. And so I moved to North Carolina and much more rural. And it was like a blank canvas. I could rewrite my whole life and I was a different person. So it was just a wonderful opportunity. There aren't any Taoists and not many Taoists in North Carolina, but there are Buddhists. So I started attending Buddhist ceremonies and the like. Now, Taoism is more contemplative and more moving, with Tai Chi and Kung Fu, and it's more embodiment of understanding the flow. Buddhism is much more meditative. And so I started meditating, and then a few folks reached out and they said, we really think that you should be a teacher. And so they put me through a 2-year intensive teaching regimen. That was about 2008, 2009. And I was, I was trained in the, typical insight meditation Tibetan methods. And it's pretty hard to say to people, hey, you want to learn meditation, give me a couple of years and 30 minutes a
Yeah, that's
day.
what I was thinking.
That ain't going to happen. So I came to Elon, and I instead of doing the work that I had been doing because of who I was, I devoted myself to taking care of what great Master Jesus would call the least of these. And I only represented indigent clients. Fortunately, Miami was very good to me. I could afford to do that. So that's what I did until 2015. And when I retired from court, Elon University approached me and they said, would you come teach law here at Elon University? So I started teaching law there. But as soon as I got there, they said, have you heard of Koru? And I said, what's Koru? And it's, oh, they developed this way of teaching meditation at Duke. And so I inquired about that. And the people at Duke came up with this crazy good way of teaching meditation to the Western mind, where instead of saying, can you sit on a cushion for a half an hour a day for 2 years? You could say to somebody, if you give me 1 hour a week for 4 weeks and practice for 10 minutes a day, and you can do it in your bed or hanging from your feet, I don't care. If you can give me that, I can teach you what meditation is, and you can have the experience of it. Then you can decide whether or not you want to continue on with it. And it's a magnificent methodology. And so I went and got trained as a Koru teacher. And now I teach on campus, and I teach in my private practice. And I see heartwarming, incredible transformations, every month, every week. I am so blessed. I get to see inside of people's thinking and work with them. And then I can see the moment they break free of the conditioning. And it's just marvelous.
It sounds fascinating. So for people that maybe meditation to them, they like the sound of it, but it feels a little bit abstract. Can you maybe explain what meditation is and maybe the impact it can have when you just embrace a practice like Koru?
So a lot of people think meditation is about quieting the mind. They think it's about silencing the mind, about peace and tranquility and crystals and tree hugging and kumbaya, and it's not. What they're thinking about really more is things like relaxation, or listening to music, or, cultivating your environment and being, the experience of awe and things like that. Meditation is really, it's a skill building process where I teach you how not to quiet your mind, but how to manage your thinking skillfully. Okay? So, Paul, you've had the experience, 2 experiences I want to ask you about. One is you've had the experience of wanting to listen to somebody and your mind drifting away.
Yeah.
And then you have this little startle feeling when you notice that your mind has drifted. Like, oh, I'm not listening.
Yeah.
Right? And then there's like a flood of judgments that occur. Right? Oh, I should have been listening and I missed what he said. And how am I going to get him to repeat it without him knowing that I wasn't listening, and I don't want to embarrass him, and blah, 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 right? And then finally that kind of quiets down, and what you do is you go back and you start listening again, and then you kind of forget about it all. You're just listening. Then your mind might drift away again, and then you go through the same thing. Oh, I'm not listening. You go back, right? That's meditating.
Okay.
Because look, our brains were evolved and designed for living in the jungle, being hunter-gatherers and having a very hard physical environment, and always being presented with opportunities for danger. poisonous insects, thorns, tigers, yeah. And so our brain evolved in such a way that it's constantly scanning for danger. So that is what happens when you're paying attention to somebody and you're listening. Your brain is saying, "Up, is there any danger around?"
Yeah, never thought of it like that.
So, and the problem, of course, is that our brains were designed for simple dangers, but today we have this chronic, undifferentiated stress that we carry, which physiologically stress and danger are equal. We soft pedal what stress is, but it's the sensation of danger. And that danger is caused by deadlines, by getting the kids to school on time, by whether I left the stove on, by all these things besides bills and politics and administrations and jobs and the whole mess. And we can't focus on any of it because it's coming at us all the time. And so we have this kind of chronic gray colored, which we can't identify. And so our brains are going to scan and they're going to keep scanning. And that's the sensation of my mind wandering away. Because you start think about the babble. Oh, did I leave the stove on? Or what do I have to do to yesterday? And I shouldn't have said that thing to that guy yesterday, right? These are all little stressors that are just floating up in your mind. Your mind's trying to grab it, want to identify one so you can solve it, but you can't. So you've had that experience. Now another
100%.
Now another experience. Have you had the experience of talking and while you're talking at the same time thinking, oh, this isn't going very well, or oh, I'm really making a good point at that, or they're gonna love this joke, and so you're kind of commenting on your talking at the same time?
Yeah, I've had that. Yeah, definitely. In interviews, in any type, it could be a function. You go to an event and you're talking with somebody, and you're trying to go with a joke or something that you feel meaningful. You feel that they will feel it's meaningful, but you're not. I'm not getting the engagement that I thought I would. So I start to
And
question
there's a
myself.
part of your mind that's commenting. You're thinking, I'm not getting the engagement
Yeah,
that I thought
totally.
I would, even as you're talking.
Absolutely.
Okay, so let's take those two things together and I can explain meditation. So with meditation, we do the exact same thing as the listening. We say we're going to intend to put our attention on a candle or on our breath or something. And very quickly, our mind drifts away. And at some point, because we formed that intention, our brain says, psst, psst, you're not paying attention to the candle. And then there's a flood of judgments. Oh, I'm doing it wrong. I made a mistake. I failed, blah, 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 blah. And then it quiets down a little bit. And then eventually, hopefully, you put your attention back on the candle and begin again. And then your mind goes off, you notice, begin again. Your mind goes off, you notice, begin again. It's the coming back and beginning again is where the healing occurs. It's not in maintaining focus. It's that beginning again, because every time you begin again, you're basically showing and proving to yourself that you can do this, that you have self-efficacy, that you can tolerate discomfort, and you're starting to build up an internal strength of mind because you're beginning again.
Yeah.
You failed and begin again, and you failed and begin again, and failed and begin again. So over time, what happens is you develop a tolerance for discomfort that allows you to look at your thinking without being so uncomfortable that you can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah. That resonates.
Okay, that resonates. Okay, so now the other part of it is that as we begin to do this little practice, we also start noticing, because we've repeated it so many times, we begin to start noticing and identifying the recurring judgments. So we start to be familiar with them. This is the same judgments every time, same thoughts. We start to be familiar with them, and all of a sudden we notice that other part of the mind that comments on our thinking has been engaged, because that's where we are noticing our judgments from. Okay, So we're starting to engage the metacognition, the thinking about our thinking aspect of our brain. And as we engage that more and more, it becomes stronger and stronger till we actually develop an ability, and this doesn't take a long time, a couple of weeks, we actually develop the ability to be more over there than in our judgments. We start out, we're totally in our judgments. Our judgments are rocking us and rolling us and changing us and making us feel and giving us emotions. But as we begin to watch them, from the place of watching them, we notice that there is a certain stability. And so in meditation, we begin to skillfully learn to strengthen our metacognition so that we can become an observer of our thoughts. And from the place of being an observer of our thoughts, we have a certain calmness and a certain stability. The stability does not come from being in the river and experiencing life, because we will still get angry, we will still feel grief, we will still have sadness, we will still have all of that. We'll be totally engaged in life in one part of our brain, and yet in the observer, we have a certain peace and we know that we're going to survive, and we have that stability and that sense of, I can do this.
Can I ask a question? Can I interject? So this question hopefully it relates to people that love the idea of meditation and what you've described, because you've broken it down in a wonderful way to me, which I hadn't considered before. But I'm thinking about people that are going through, say somebody's at work, they've just got an email and they're just a bit anxious about it, or maybe angry, they're going through a range of emotions. At what point should they, and there could be other examples where people are having that moment of stress. At what point should they engage that meditation that you wonderfully described? Is it now, or is it at a set time they have?
I hear what you're saying. So like what I would say is, if my friend asked me to move into his second story flat with all of his furniture, I don't think I should start going to the gym to become stronger the morning of the day, right?
Yeah.
If I need to build my muscles up to help him move in, I need to go a couple of months earlier and build those muscles up, right?
Okay.
So you start meditating as a practice, and then when those times come along, you're prepared for them. You don't, okay? As an example, the other day I'm in a hurry, and I really was in a hurry, and I'm feeling a little anxious, and I get into line behind some lady. She only had a few things, so I got in line behind her. And then she pulled out her 3-ring binder with all the coupons. Right? So I had a choice. I could either like really let my anxiety take hold of me, or I could just pay attention to my breathing and move into my observer. And so I did. And, I spent a couple of minutes, just, observing my thoughts and thinking about my thinking and being the observer of it all. And I actually found out, the whole thing was kind of funny and comical and was a little bit. And then she was gone and I checked out and I went about my business. I could have fallen into a self-defeating, cycle of criticism and anxiety, but I was able to simply, at my choice, because I've done it, a few times. I'm familiar with the observer. I know my buddy, and I just move over there because I practice, to a gym and start with the 50-pound barbell.
No, I like that. So I'm conscious of your time. I know you've got another appointment in the top of the hour. So I could talk to you forever. I almost feel that I would like another conversation with you at some point.
Let's do it.
Because there's so much more that we haven't covered today that I think we need to cover in another conversation. So I'd definitely love to schedule that in with you. But so for people that are really curious about you, and maybe I know that you, although you teach at Elon, you do have a wonderful website where people can register, sign up, etc., etc. What's the best way for people to get in contact with you if they want to maybe absorb some of your material? Your website.
There are some free downloadable ebooks available there. I've got 56 gigabytes of audio and videos that people can have for free. They can contact me by clicking on the Contact Us button. They can sign up for a free meditation class. I offer a 1-hour free meditation class. So we can look and explore all these things in detail. So there's all kinds of things that are available there. Best place to get in touch with me.
Okay. I'm going to put the link on the show note. Excited for people to find out more about Bob and what you do. Really, really fascinating. And last question, recurring question. So if you could invite 3 inspirational people for dinner, they can be alive or past. Who might you invite?
The Dalai Lama. I'm looking around because I keep Burke Lewis and Judge Gerald Kogan, my mentor, my legal mentor when I was growing up as a lawyer.
Okay, wonderful. Who's Brooke Lewis? Is it Brooke Lewis?
I'm sorry, Ernest Lewis?
Ernest Lewis.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bob, wow, I've loved this conversation. I'm going to let you go now because I do know that you have a pressing appointment. But definitely, I'm going to be in touch because I definitely want to do a part 2 of this because I feel like I've scratched the surface of you and what you do, and you've made meditation to me more. You've broken down the equation for me. You've broken down the equation
I'd
for
love
me.
maybe we could even do a guided meditation.
We'll discuss that on email.
Okay.
Okay, lovely. And thank you everybody for tuning into this episode of My Perfect Failure. If you're watching on YouTube, please do hit the subscribe button. It really does help us grow the channel. And your feedback is most welcome. So we're keen to hear about the things you like and equally the things you don't like. So you can find me at paul@myperfectfailure.com, or you can find me via the contact page on the website. So take care for now. Bye.
Thanks for listening to My Perfect Failure podcast. Be sure to visit www.myperfectfailure.com to join the conversation. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes or Google Play. Look out for our next episode.